we're going to start off with something we're going to start in the very human level. And I've left a little space in your note page if you want to kind of write down some things about yourself that may come up during this talk. No one sees your note page, I presume. You know, so I really invite you to put down what your thoughts are and any thoughts or revelations that you have. Because I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself saying something and 2 seconds later saying, oh, why did I say that? Or acting out in some way and thought, why? What was I thinking of? Why? How could I have ever done something like that? And sometimes instantly, and sometimes, you know, maybe a week later or some time later, you look back and think, oh, you know, where did that come from? And I think one of the things is where those things come from is that it's a reaction. Something hit us the wrong way, something rubbed us the wrong way, and we just, you know, without any connection with God or our inner selves, we just went somewhere and we said something or did something. It was a reaction to what we saw or what we heard. And often, I find those reactions are based in, like I said, not God, but in fear. Someone was sharing at a class the other night that as she approached a pedestrian walkway, she stopped, but she could see the other car was not stopping. And there was someone, you know, in the crosswalk. And she had a big reaction to that and kind of gave the other driver, you know, the eye. And so we talked about, well, where did that come from? You know, we thought, well, that wasn't really expressing God, you know. Where did that come from? And we talked about it perhaps being something related to fear. You know, you could see what was going to happen, and you had no control over it, and you were, you know, it made you angry. It made you fearful that someone was going to get hurt. So we have lots of opportunities to approach life that way. Every day, you know, as we drive to work, we have lots of opportunities to react to people, to situations and circumstances. Every day in our just everyday activities, we speak to a lot of people that could certainly push our buttons or cause us to react. But what's the consequences of living life like this? And often, like even moments later, as we can say, we can have some regrets about what we said. We can have some disappointments, feelings of disappointment in ourselves or in the situation, or guilt. You know, if it's something that, like we could see the repercussions of our reaction, we look back and thought, oh, you know. So living life probably that way is not something that that's to be desired. Because who wants to live with the doubts and the guilt and the distractions and the fear? But there is no doubt about it. Things do affect us in our everyday lives. Things change what we were going to do, affect what we were going to say. It may even seem like that circumstances control us. 5 or 6 years ago, I was the vice principal at a small school. And actually, I took on that role without really knowing what vice principals are supposed to do, which is a lot of disciplinary actions. So often I would end up with 2 very angry children in my office, 5 to 10 years old. And something had happened out on the playground, and someone had just wailed off on somebody or kicked them or threw something at them or, you know, shoved them or something. So here we are in the office, 2 very angry young people. And often the perpetrator would say, he made me do it. He made me do it. And I thought, that is amazing. I looked at him, I said, you make me do that. He can't. You cannot make somebody do something. It's impossible. And sometimes it really feels like, you know, how else could have I acted? That was the only thing to do. And you get real self-righteous and really sure about, you know, where you are, as if that person, there was no other choice, that person just made you do that. But the fact is, the truth is that no one can make us do anything. And I have that image of pinball machines, you know, where the ball goes out, nice and, you know, it's kind of a pretty good path there when it starts off. And then, you know, if there's nothing in the way and nothing moving in there, that ball would just gently and easily just glide right down to the bottom. But instead, those switches bounce it this way, and then they whack it that way, and then it goes way up to the top again, and then it drops over to the side again. And you know what? If we live our lives out of that reactive kind of state, that's what it feels like. And maybe some of you can have had parts of your life that feel like that, where things are out of control, and you're just bouncing back and forth, and it's chaotic and frustrating and doesn't feel very good. But there is another way to live life, and that is to respond to life, to have response to life instead of reaction. So instead of living at the whim of outside circumstances and influences, we can live by choice, with integrity and wholeness. And that's living with God. That's letting God be the center of our awareness, God being the place where we speak from, where we act from, where we get ideas from. I don't know if any of you have seen those posters. They've been out for quite a few years of the Lighthouse posters, that series with the huge crashing waves. Anybody? Yeah, have seen those? I've got one in my office at home, and it's the one of, you can only see about half the lighthouse, but the wave is, halfway up the lighthouse and engulfing it and coming forward. And right at the front is the little door of the lighthouse, and in the doorway is the lighthouse keeper, standing there with his hands in his pocket. And behind him, it's like 30-foot wave, just engulfing, big green, white water, just ready to engulf this lighthouse. And the reason why I have this in my office is because it reminds me that no matter what it looks like on the outside, when all hell's breaking loose, right? We can remain calm and poised and centered. Put our hands in our pockets. Safe. So I see the lighthouse as, representing God. We stand in God, and we're safe, and we can act out of that place and make decisions out of that place, no matter what is going on around us. Because we are never outside of God's presence in any case. And often we do feel like that, and I know this for myself. Sometimes we don't see God. It doesn't feel like we're acting within God. But really, that there's that phrase, in Him we live and move and have our being. Because we are spiritual beings and God is our spiritual parent, we cannot be disconnected from that relationship. When we act out of fear, when we react, we're looking at things in a very small way, a way that we don't see the whole picture and that we're not going back to our source in. And I was trying to think of some image to express that, and the only thing I could think of, and I don't know even if many people have had this experience, if you've been on a train and you're traveling from one car to another, or in subways, and as you cross between, you actually have to step, off of one car and onto the other, and below you see the track that's going like that, really, and it's very kind of like you kind of have to gulp and just go and just step over it, because it looks bad. And to me, that's what life can look like when we look out of a reactive kind of mode. We see something, it looks scary, and then we just react, and we're not living from that place of wholeness. In James 3:17, it says, "The wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy." And that's how we enlarge that window of our experience, is through our understanding and our wisdom. And it says the wisdom from above. And so we know what that wisdom is, don't we? That's God. So what is the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Because lots of us have lots of information, and we use our intellect, and we make decisions, and we take in facts. But there is a difference between living out of our knowledge, which is what we see and what we can measure, and living out of our wisdom, which is knowledge combined with experience and, what else do I have in here? Action, with understanding, and lastly, with love. Knowledge needs to be integrated with the dynamic power of love in order to express wisdom. And from that wholeness, from that place of wisdom, that's where we enlarge our world and trust our world a little bit more and know that God is providing that wisdom for us. In Unity, we look at the 12 disciples in a somewhat of a different way than a lot of other thoughts, and that is that each of the disciples represents one of the 12 powers. And so as Jesus had the 12 disciples traveling with him, we also have our disciples, or our 12 powers, traveling with us on our spiritual journey. And they surround us, and they're available to us at all times. And each of these disciples stands for a different power. And there's things like love and faith, judgment, strength, imagination, wisdom. And what we see in the Bible is that Jesus often sends out James and John together. And James represents wisdom, and John represents love. And this is how, when we look at Bible stories and we read into them a little bit, we can learn from them. Even a simple thing like that, like noticing who went together. Jesus could see the power in wisdom and love when they're meshed together. In Charles Fillmore's book, The 12 Powers, he says, "Wisdom is a great dynamic force that carries its power to the love center. In the action and reaction between these two centers, wisdom and love, we get our greatest realizations and most wonderful spiritual radiations. Wisdom and love, when combined, produce peace and poise." Now maybe that sounds like a better place to live our lives from. Peace and poise, like the lighthouse keeper. So living in that center of peace and poise is really living from the wellspring of God. It's living consciously of God's presence, and it enables us to respond instead of react. It allows us not to be subject to outside circumstances and the opinions and the actions of others. And when we live in this perfect place, it is called living in the kingdom. And this is referred to, of course, many times in the Bible, the kingdom of God, because we are living in the kingdom of God right now. And it says very clearly, many places, that it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. So it's not something that we need to earn. It is not something that we feel like we deserve. It is not something we need to wait for or do something in order to attain it. It says very clearly, the kingdom of God has already been given to us. It is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. So there's no withholding, there's no if, I don't see that statement as having any ifs or any way out of it. It is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. And when we live in that kingdom, that's when we live from the place of wisdom and understanding, of love, peace, in the place where we can keep God at the center of our activities and our attention so that we can stand like the lighthouse keeper, poised and peaceful. So as we learn to live more and more from this place, our lives will be experienced differently, and we will live in peace and poise. We will respond and not react. We will remember to combine our knowledge and our love to produce wisdom. Wisdom that will express through every moment in our lives.